friends, and welcome back to 155 Books. My name is Shannon, and today I've got another relaxing, cozy, informal, past, present, future video where I talk about the books I've finished recently, the books I'm currently reading, and the books I want to read soon. I really enjoyed doing this format in the last video. Like I say, it was massively inspired by Amelia from Amelia Barlow Books, and yeah, I enjoyed it so much that I'm doing another one quite soon afterwards because I've actually been reading quite a lot, and that's really exciting. So obviously I wanted to share with you the books I've been reading. So if you watched my last video, you would have seen that one of the books I wanted to read in the future was Skullduggery Pleasant by Derek Landy, and I've actually read it, which is awesome. Not only have I read the first one, I've also read the second one. I'm really enjoying getting back into this series. So I first read this like I say, when I was in high school, which was a really, really long time ago. So in my last video, I gave a kind of incorrect synopsis, so I will correct that now by letting you know that it follows a main character called Stephanie. Also, it's set in Dublin, which I completely forgot about until I started reading it again, which is awesome because I went to Dublin for the first time this year, so it kind of all ties in together, which is really nice. But Stephanie is in high school, and when her uncle dies, at the reading of his will, she meets Skullduggery Pleasant, who is in disguise, and a few dramatic things happen, and then she finds out he's a skeleton detective, and there is this whole world of magic that she didn't know about, and her uncle was involved in that, and you know, it just like goes from there. You've got bad guys, you've got, like I say, skeleton detectives, you've got a really great cast of characters in this, both bad and good, and you just love them all from like the get-go, if that makes sense. I would say this one I gave it about 4 stars because you can kind of tell it was his first book that he ever wrote, so there are few bits that could have, I guess, kind of like flowed a little bit better. However, I will say that in the second book, this one I'm probably going to give 4.5 stars. He gets the bad guys much better, and also the story is more complex in terms of the bad guys and what's going on and what they're having to stop. There's like loads of different things happening at once, which makes it a bit more interesting, and I'm really excited to see, the more I read from this series, how Derek Landy's writing improves. Because like I say, the second one already has shown like a big jump in terms of the characters, and like I say, there's some really good bad guys in this, and what I love about it is that it's so funny. So Skullduggery Pleasant is sort of like a cheeky guy, and some of the bad guys in the second book are a bit cheeky as well, so even though they're bad, you kind of like them. And also you've got like morally grey characters that sometimes are helpful but then also aren't helpful or had bad pasts. So again, you've got like very complex characters which you maybe wouldn't expect from a children's fantasy series. So all in all, really been enjoying these, and like I say, cannot wait to continue on with this series. The next book I finished recently, which I'm so glad I finally finished, and also kind of ties into Skullduggery Pleasant. So when I was reading the first book, something occurred to me. It reminded me massively of the first Shadowhunter book, which is City of Bones, because it follows a main character, a girl who one night in a club sees Shadowhunters, and then her life changes and she realises that she is a Shadowhunter, and there's this world full of magic and bad guys. So I was like, oh, it's very similar. So obviously it made me want to read a Shadowhunter book because I wanted that more complex, I guess, fantasy world and story and characters. So I finally picked up Lady Midnight to finish reading, and I devoured this. So I actually started reading this last year and hadn't even read a quarter of it before having to put it down, mainly because I think it was just taking me a while to warm to these new set of characters, to the point where I kind of thought I wasn't going to enjoy this book or this series at all. But then picking it back up, like I say, I devoured it, and I cannot believe I couldn't warm to these characters to begin with, because when I picked it back up, I fell in love with every single one of these characters in the LA world. So you've got Emma and Julian, who I love Emma, who is kind of a little bit like Jace which I think people made that comparison, but you have to kind of get that out of your mind, or you can't love her for herself, if that makes sense. You've got Julian, who I think for the first part of this book is very moody and distant, which kind of annoyed me. I was a bit like, oh, this is just annoying. Why is he like this all the time? And then you start to unpick his character and find out why he's like that. And you just want to like cuddle him and be like, I'm so sorry because your life has just been awful and I just want to make it better. I think the thing that I loved most about this when I finished it, looking back, was that weirdly, again, it was one of the things that I struggled with when I first started it, is that it follows the Blackthorn family, and there is a lot of them. So there's a lot of children, so trying to get my head around who they all were was kind of a bit much, and I did kind of think, did Cassandra Clare really need to make the Blackthorn family that big? But it becomes part of the story, and like I say, it shows the burden that Julian is put under, because obviously his parents are both dead and his uncle is not much help in terms of running the institute, so he is basically running the institute, looking after all these children when he wasn't even their eldest brother. And it just reminded me that Cassandra Clare does have this really amazing ability to tie in something that is so real into a fantasy novel, because like I say, there are people who are carers and things like that, and it does kind of unpick what it is like to be a young carer, which again, like I say, I thought was really clever, and just really, really enjoyed. I also liked that this kind of followed a murder mystery kind of vibe, and the ending, yes. So when I get onto talking about the books I want to read soon, you can imagine the first book I'm going to mention. But yes, I think I gave this 4.5 or 4.75 stars. Like I say, there were a few issues I had with it, and I think it was just Cassandra Clare getting used to writing these new characters. And I think the thing I missed the most about this one was that it was mainly just set in the Institute. It was very rare that as shadow hunters they went out into LA fighting demons and things, which I kind of felt held it back a little bit in terms of its world building, unlike the other shadow hunter books where they're always out and about in New York, or they go to Alicante and all these other places. I kind of felt like that was missing from this one, but I'm hoping that kind of features in the other two books that are in this series. Now onto the books that I am currently reading. So these are very different to the books that I have read recently, so it might take me a while to sort of get through these, but I'm really enjoying taking my time with the book that the book I'm going to talk about now, because it's a short story collection. So I've had this short story collection and another one on my TBR by the same author, but this one has called to me the most out of the two of them, and I'm so glad I picked it up to start reading it, because it is beautifully written and just amazing, and I know it's going to be a 5-star read for me. But that is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Compared to the other short story collection, which is Her Body and Other Parties, In the Dream House is actually a memoir following Carmen's life in her relationship with, I do believe, an abusive woman. It's getting to that point, and it's in places very difficult to read, and the way Carmen Maria Machado sort of uses all these sort of metaphors to explain not just her situation, but something that maybe isn't talked about as much, not just domestic abuse in general, but domestic abuse in LGBTQ plus relationships, and how it is important to talk about those, because at the end of the day, everyone is human, and if we just tell the fairy stories, then that's not the truth, if that makes sense. I can't explain to you, I cannot explain to you this book, you just have to read it, but it's absolutely beautifully written, really well done. I'm really enjoying just taking my time with this, reading a few, like I say, short stories or short chapters at a time. It is following like I say, a chronology, which I am enjoying as well. So in some places I can't really put it down. I read more than I would just read one or two. I'm at part 2. Yes, and I know as soon as I finish reading this, I will probably pick up her other short story collection, which, like I say, is Her Body and Other Parties. And the other book I am currently reading is an audiobook, and that is Deep Work by Cal Newport. So recently, I finished reading Digital Minimalism, also by Cal Newport. So this one, I think he wrote after Deep Work, because he mentioned deep work quite a lot in this book. But after reading this, which I think I gave 5 stars, I just knew Cal Newport's non-fiction books were definitely for me, and I'd had the audiobook for Deep Work on my Audible for a really long time, so obviously I just immediately wanted to read that too after finishing this. But in terms of Deep Work, Cal Newport in his books does this really impressive thing of taking something that would seem quite complex and making it very simple and easy to understand. So with Deep Work, obviously the concept is quite simple. It's just sort of about how doing an hour, 2 hour, or a period of deep work can be massively beneficial. But what I like is he normally splits his books into 2 sections. So the first half, he will sort of talk about like the history and research that shows why it's so important. And then the second half is normally a sort of actioned how you can get used to doing more deep work to strengthen your brain, to improve your life, these kind of things. And like I say, the way that is formatted really works for me, because then when you get to the action point, you now know why you're doing it, because he's kind of explained that in the first half. Yes, and I also listened to Digital Minimalism on audiobook, so the audiobooks are really easy to listen to for me and very engaging. I like listening to a lot of my non-fiction on audiobook anyway, but yes, I'm still in the part 1 section of Deep Work, and again, it's very interesting, and I can't wait to get to the second half for the actioned part to see how maybe it's going to affect my life and change my life, like Digital Minimalism definitely did. But like I say, different video coming on that one. Now on to the books that I want to read soon. Obviously, the first one being Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare, which is the second book in the Dark Artifices series after Lady Midnight. Again, I've read the blurb for this one, and a bit like Lady Midnight, it doesn't give much away. And again, I think that's what I maybe struggled with slightly with Lady Midnight, was that I couldn't really see where it was heading in terms of its main, like, action story path type of thing. But I'm sure once I start reading this one, I'm going to just start devouring it again. I really, really hope, like I did with Lady Midnight. I think I read Lady Midnight in like less than a week, which for me nowadays, for a big chunky book that's got small print, is actually very impressive. Another thing that I'm really excited about this one for is that it's got parts in it. So like part 1, again, that was missing from Lady Midnight, and I really missed it, because with the other Cassandra Clare books, when I know that I'm coming up to a second part, if I've got a few chapters left, I will just read to that point. So knowing that this one's got parts in it makes me think I'm going to read it quicker. But again, I'm probably going to talk more about this one when I've finished it, but I'm very excited about picking this one up. And the last book I want to talk about in this video is obviously the next book I want to read soon. I haven't actually got a copy of this, but I plan to pick up a copy next week. But that is Enter Ghost by Elizabeth Hamad. So this one has been shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. So when I saw the long list, a few people messaged me to say, you will really enjoy this one. It sounds like something you will really enjoy, because it involves Shakespeare. I will read the synopsis to you in a second. However, obviously it's now been shortlisted, and every year I do try to read at least one on either the long list or the short list, and for me it had to be this one. So like I say, I'm just going to read the synopsis to you so you know what it's about. After years away from her family's homeland and reeling from a disastrous love affair, actress Sonia Nazir returns to Haifa to visit her older sister Haneen. On her arrival, she finds her relationship to Palestine is fragile, both bone deep and new. When Sonia meets the charismatic Mariam, a local director, she joins a production of Hamlet in the West Bank. Soon Sonia is rehearsing with a dedicated, if competitive group of men, yet as opening night draws closer, it becomes clear just how many obstacles stand between the troupe. Amidst it all, the life she once knew starts to give way to the exhilarating possibility of finding a new self in her ancestral home. So obviously it seems to be this kind of, when contemporary books like this involve Shakespeare, normally there's this sort of like, as they are performing Hamlet, other things kind of unravel and like parallels are made to the character's current situation, and it kind of helps them understand their current situation. So I don't really know if it's going to be like that or if it's just part of the story. I'm not really sure, but I'm really excited about reading it. So like I say, I'm going to pick up a copy next week and hopefully read it soon. So I'm just so excited about all the books that, like I say, I've finished recently, I'm currently reading, I want to read soon. Like I say, I think this format is actually making me more excited about reading, and like I say, thinking about what I'm going to read next. So like I say, this is probably going to be a continuation that you will see on my channel of this video. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books I've talked about today, and I'll see you soon in my next one. Bye!